Middle school parents, thank you so much for tuning in. I just want to let you know right off the bat that this is something for you. We realize that we send you a lot of stuff from the middle school ministry that's for your student, and your leaders are reaching out and all of this kind of great stuff. But right now, I just want to clearly state right off the bat that this is going to be a resource and a time specifically for you. And what we want to do is just cover some of the current circumstances that are going on and how we can live in light of them, as well as just some positives and some things that we can work on as as you guys have middle school students in your home, probably more than you ever have before. And we want to give you some tools and resources to do that. I'm Justin. I am the middle school pastor at First Baptist Church, Hendersonville, and I got a good friend and a colleague here in Jason Gibson. He is here. He will tell you a little bit more about himself here in just a moment. But what I do want to encourage you to do is I want to encourage you to grab a sheet of paper and a pen, because we're going to be sharing some things that we just want you to go ahead and write down. And it might not be in point form. It might not be these really fancy, cute sayings, but what they will be are truth that will help you in this circumstance and being at home with your middle school student. So with that being said, Jason, thank you so much for joining. I'm so thankful that you and we have the resources to make this happen, even staying at home, right? The quarantine, everything, we can do Zoom, and it's just awesome. I think it's so cool that we have this type of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for thinking of me for the students and families you pour into.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. I'll tell you this, there's nobody better, right? You might not say that, but I'll say that. But man, Jason, if you don't mind, before we get started jumping into all this stuff, would you just share a little bit about what you do, kind of where you work, for the people that might not know? Share a little bit about your family, some of your passions, and then we'll get started here in just a second.
Yeah. So I'm the director of the BAB Center for Counseling. It's a counseling practice here on the north side of Nashville in Hendersonville. And it's actually a ministry extension of First Baptist Church, Hendersonville. So we've been so fortunate to grow and to do some really special things, not only here, not only the church, but not only in the community, but really around the world, where we're able to leverage technology to counsel and meet people right where they are, no matter where they are, so that we can help. And the three words we use are help, hope, and healing, to be a part of that process. So we're a team of 30, and we specialize in working with kids that are 3 years old, all the way to someone that's dealing with stressors at 103 and everything in the middle. So, it's interesting. I felt a calling to the family and to working with families and helping them all the way back when I was doing camp. I was doing this camp called Cross Point, and I remember sitting in an evening worship experience surrounded by middle schoolers after we'd done a full day of coaching. It was a Christian sports camp, and just felt that calling, like, hey, I was called to work with families, and it's just been a real blessing to see that come alive through being a part of such a incredible, forward-moving, far-reaching counseling practice that connects with families from all walks of life. So just so thankful to be a part of that. I'm a father of 4 children. I've got a senior, sophomore, 5th grade, and 1st grade. So we're across the ages and right in the thick of it all, just experiencing life as it comes. And what's funny is I really thought I was a parenting expert until I had children, and that gave a harsh dose of reality. So as I come here today, I come with a whole lot of humility. Just recognizing that as parents, we're trying to do the best that we can. And I try to not take credit for all the great things that happen, and to also not take the blame for all the bad things that are happening. And I just recognize that I'm doing the very best that I can to be the holy, godly influence in the lives of the children that I have, recognizing that one day they're going to be outside of my home. So I want to give them all that I can during this time when they're under my care.
That's good. Yeah, I knew that I wasn't a parenting expert, and then I have a 7-month-old, and I absolutely know that I'm not a parenting expert. So there's absolutely not. Well, parents, you might feel that way. You might feel like you were a parenting, you got it, and you had kids and it's like, oh my gosh. Or you might have felt like you've been a parenting expert for the first 5 grades that your kid went through. And then they got to middle school and you were like, nope, this is not the same kid. And so I get that. And so wherever you are on that, we want this to be something helpful for you. Well, uh, like I said at the very beginning, in light of everything that's going on, I want to point out a couple of things, like bring them to light to kind of give us some show you the reasons why we're having these conversation and asking these questions. You are having more time with your middle school student at your home than you probably ever have before. Like this is unprecedented. This is something that's never happened in the history of our world, really. And you are having to have conversations. You're having to probably sit around the dinner table and eat meals more than you ever have before, because you're not going to practice, you're not coming back from this event, you're not going to this place. Like you're having to do things that you probably have not had to do in a long time with your middle schooler. And I want to point this out too. Middle schoolers are smelly, they're awkward, and they communicate in 2 ways: the head nod and the shoulder shrug. Like that's all you get out of middle school students, most likely. And so we want to address that and help you kind of figure out ways to navigate those types of things. And so we all know that this is difficult. It is hard. And for you as parents, you might be sharing custody with your ex-spouse. And that's a reality that we have to figure out through this. And there's also some of you that are staying home with your spouse more than you ever have before. And I don't know if you're like this, but the first week was, okay, I could get used to this. And then you start communicating through looks and it's just different. We've never had to do this before. And I just want us to be open, transparent, honest, vulnerable, and hopefully answer some of these questions for you. So Jason, really where I want to start is simply the conversation piece, because I do think that these parents, middle school parents specifically, are having to communicate probably to one of the hardest groups of people maybe to communicate with, because they only communicate with shoulder shrugs and head nods, or maybe the occasional or whatever. And so could you just maybe speak about that? Do you have any tips in regards to engaging middle school specifically in regards to conversation, maybe around the dinner table or crossing paths in the hallway of the home, whatever that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you what's so interesting is a lot of times we think to ourselves as parents, who is this child? Because he or she was not like this 2 years ago. That they've shifted from I walk in the door and they run to me to now I walk in the door and they're indifferent. They don't even recognize that I exist. So part of it, I think, is just having a really healthy outlook that this is part of the natural cycle of development in which they're becoming more independent. What makes it difficult is they have no idea what they're doing. So they're trying on all the different versions of independence for size to see which one fits. It's kind of like a new pair of shoes. You are trying to figure them out, so you'll try out all these different versions. So your middle schooler's trying on this cold and aloof little experience to see how that works. They're trying on this annoying talking all the time thing to see how this works. They're trying, this tearful side. They're just experiencing all these emotions as their bodies are changing, and they're trying all like, okay, who am I? They're trying to figure out their identity, and their identity is reflected through their actions. So they try all the actions out. So I say that to say, if you're wondering who your kid is, because it's not who they were, that's part of the process. And to look at that and not think that you're a bad parent or that they're a bad kid, just know that that's part of the journey. And that's where communication is so important, is for me as a dad, or for as a mom, meeting them where they are and being their guide on the side so that you can walk them through those next steps. And that in a way you can help them say, hey, this reflects your awesomeness, or gently saying, hey, you know what, that actually doesn't reflect the awesomeness that you have. There's a lot of times with my kids as they're getting older, and talk about my older two, I would say, you are incredibly and remarkably made. And quite honestly, you're brilliant. But what you just did makes it really hard for people to see. See, now, if you notice how I communicated that, I addressed the issue, but I reminded them who they were. And that's what happens. A lot of times when you correct your kids, you accidentally, or in the heat of the moment, or speaking to who they are when that's really not who they are. So, and this is on the correction part, and I'm only going to address that first because as parents, we're probably up to our throats in correction with our kids.
For sure. Yeah.
You always want to separate the choice from the child. So you want to separate the choice from the middle schooler, so that if your middle schooler does something that's not quite right, instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, you are such a fool," you can say, "Oh my goodness, like I know who you are, and what you did was a foolish thing to do." See, I know what I did was inserted just a few extra words in that sentence, but it's so important because what you don't want to do is to write on the heart of your child that they're bad, foolish, an idiot, stupid, all of those things. You want to help them understand who they are is fearfully and wonderfully made, and what they did not reflect that. So who they are is separate from what they did, and you want to be able to separate those pieces out. So I'm not saying you don't address the problem. I'm just saying make sure you put the problem in the right box, and the right box is not who they are. And in seeing that, that allows them to accept the feedback that you're giving them. And let me be clear, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a pleasant conversation. And it certainly doesn't mean they're going to say, "Thank you, Father, for this generous feedback about the quality of my decision." It just means that in their heart, the right message will be written, that they are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that it is not congruent with the actions that they had just taken. So that's just on the correction piece, but let me flip over to the connection piece. A lot of conversations with middle schoolers, high schoolers, upper elementary, they're really great when they're side by side instead of nose to nose. So what I mean by that is, and I learned this with my kids, but it's true for the families that I work with, that like if I roll up on my kids and I'm nose to nose with them wanting to have a conversation, sometimes in their awkwardness, like it's too much pressure, right? They feel like, okay, what is my dad asking and what answer does he want to hear? So that instead of thinking about what's on my heart and I need to allow it to overflow into my dad or my mom, they're thinking, uh-oh, what am I supposed to say? Am I in trouble? Is this really some questions about what I did 2 weeks ago and he just found out and now I'm trying to answer that? So that whole nose to nose sometimes can be a little intimidating, or it can be pressure filled, so then they shut down. So I love the side by side, like grabbing your middle schooler and going on a walk. And they're like, "Why are we going on a walk?" And honestly, because I need to be in shape and you can be there with me. And if I have a heart attack, at least somebody can call 911 on the cell phone, you know, and I'm being funny and silly, but maybe partially truthful. But what happens is I'm setting the stage so that we can spend time together. And I'm not setting the stage for you are going to be in the spotlight and you must talk back to me and tell me everything that I want to know. So when you find yourselves naturally creating experiences where you're side by side, you're setting the stage to have a great conversation. And you just start walking. And as you're walking, there's all kinds of things that you will notice. So begin making comments about things that you see. And you're going to find that as you make comments, they're going to jump in and begin communicating with you. And it can happen so naturally. Even like your quietest child, your most introverted child, if you go and you walk long enough, they're eventually going to say something. Now it might be, "I'm ready to go back to the house." That might be what they say. And then you just say, "Okay." And you pull them to the side and you look at them in the eyes and you say, "I just want you to know how much this means to me." And then you go back to side and then you walk back. So what you're doing at that moment is you're planting a seed for a conversation rather than forcing it to happen. And I think, and I've done this as a dad, we're so busy that I'm trying to cram in a conversation when it fits within my schedule. And it doesn't work real well that way. So now we've got all this extra time so that if we can set the stage for conversations to happen, then we're going to increase the likelihood that it does happen. Because some of your middle schoolers might wonder what in the world's wrong with you, because you're all of a sudden now really wanting to talk to them. And they're like, hold on a second, do you have coronavirus because you're wanting to have a deep conversation with me? I don't know what's going on. So just recognize that they're pretty brilliant. They'll do things that are pretty silly, but they're super aware on a relational level. So don't face-to-face force it. Side by side,
Yeah.
set the stage, and it increases the likelihood that you're going to have some really great conversations.
Yeah, Jason, thanks. I wanted to kind of go back really quick. You said a couple of things that I want to make sure that these parents are kind of hearing again. One, you said always separate the child from the choice. I think that is so important when addressing middle school students. Like, they don't need somebody to stand up on a stage, or a parent to, you know, get all up in their face and say, boom, 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 boom. You know, they need somebody to come alongside them, you know, separate that. And then you got into that side by side thing. I think that's so cool. I was watching the TV show couple days ago, like we probably all are doing right now. And one of the things, it was a doctor and a patient, and they were trying to get the patient to talk. And instead of sitting on the bed talking, they got the patient out of the bed and started working on a puzzle next to each other. And
Mm.
after several minutes, the patient just started answering and kind of letting into some of their history that was resulting in this health issue. And so it's like that side by side thing really does work. It kind of, in a weird way, tears down those barriers, to have those meaningful conversations. And then lastly, you said time over your address. You know, make the time to take a walk, make the time to play the video game next to the person, make the time to have the conversation with them, and then at that moment it will come, and you'll have that spotlight thing that hopefully you'll see and be able to speak life into that person and your middle school student. Well, Jason, I want to ask one more question specifically in regards to middle school students, and then I kind of want to wrap us up after that, and I'll bring it up again, maybe more on the husband and wife side, just like
Mm-hmm.
navigating that type of stuff in the home, because we all know, you know, when mom and dad are healthy, uh, then the family's healthy, you know. And so I want to talk about that just briefly. But Jason, I would love for you to share really quick, maybe it's just some positive effects and maybe some negative effects that we're seeing from this virus, uh, whether it's anxiety or whether it's, you know, people being scared, and maybe even some negative effects too. How does this affect a middle schooler? Because middle school parents, you know this, your middle school student is trying to, at this moment, figuring out who they are. And that's why I love middle school ministry. It's because I believe this. It's kind of the last preventative ministry that any church has is middle school. Because when they get to high school, they've got their core friends. They've probably made their convictions, whether it's right or wrong. They've probably kind of got a path that they're wanting to go down on. Middle school, they're trying to figure it out. And that's what I love. I want to just be a small part in helping a middle school student find the right convictions, find the right friends, find the right path to go down. And so this is shaping the path, uh, uh, whether we say it or not, it is. And so positively and negatively. And so Jason, would you mind sharing maybe some couple of things that you've seen or hearing, that you would say from a professional side of just some positive and negative effects of this going on in middle school specifically?
Yeah, you know, it's really fascinating how our personalities have a huge impact
Mhm.
on what's going on in relation to this. You know, a lot of times middle school can be a very stressful time when you're looking at like clothes. Like, I don't like, what am I going to wear? The clothes that my parents make me wear are not cool, and I get made fun of. Like, I'm actually the oldest of four. So being the oldest of four kids and being a boy, like, I had absolutely no fashion sense. So like, going to school, and once I realized that what my mom was making me wear wasn't really cool, I mean, I was like shocked. I was like, what? You know? And so for me as a middle school kid, actually being home with, in social isolation was like super cool, because like all I
Mhm.
wanted to wear was a t-shirt and shorts and flip-flops, and I don't have to worry about having cool clothes.
Yeah.
Maybe your middle schooler struggles academically, right? Well, I don't have to worry about a teacher calling on me in class to go work a math problem up on the board that I don't know how to do. Or
Mhm.
maybe socially, like, I just haven't found my friend group, and lunchtime is sheer torture. And I'm the kid that gets his lunch and says, I need to go to the bathroom, or I'm the girl that has to get the lunch and I go sit in the bathroom stall the whole time so I don't have to sit at school by myself, at the lunch table by
Mm.
myself. So for some of our kids, like, this is actually pretty good. And
Yeah.
it's almost like you can have a return to your childhood experience because it's
Mm.
home and play and safe. Um, but then there's a large portion of kids in which middle school, like super extroverts, like this is your people. You get energy
Yeah.
from others. And like right now, your middle schooler is dying because they wanted to be at Wednesday night because Wednesday night is with their people. And
Yeah.
they like love the milkshakes that are being made on Wednesday night and the laughter and just all of that. And just the experience of standing with other people singing and worshiping God. And just, I mean, and they're dying. They're just like
Mm.
literally walking around the house wondering how in the world they're going to survive. And then the news that came out yesterday that school has been canceled, school has been stopped. No, you will not return to campus. School hasn't been stopped. They're just not going to go back to campus.
Yeah.
Like that was like a death sentence to them. Like
Yeah.
seriously, it just removed any hope that they had to be back with their people. So, so we're seeing like those two extremes in which some people like this is good. You know, there was a meme that said, "Hey, I'm an introvert and I've been training for this pandemic my whole life." And but on the flip side, it's like, hey, people give me energy and I'm
Mm-hmm.
shriveling up like a plant without water. So
Yeah.
it's not, so what I want to encourage all of us as parents with our children is really just to really take time to figure out what's going on with them and
Yeah.
recognizing that our children, if you have more than one, they're probably different, that they're going to react differently, and
Yeah.
being able to meet their needs right where they are. I'll tell you something that's interesting for our introverted clients or people that we see here at the center that they're doing really great. It actually is time where we're like, okay, we're super excited that this is great. So now let's take this time when things are great to build the skills for when we go
Mm.
back to a life in which you're not socially isolated, because it would be
Yeah.
real easy to just kind of like shift on autopilot and love not having to interact with people. And
Yeah.
really ultimately what we're doing is, okay, let's build some of the tools to be able to survive when we have to go back to the office or when we have to go back to insert awkward social situation here. So
Sure.
just being aware that kids will respond different. Their personality and the way that they were created will impact how they're responding. So
Mm.
our job as a parent is to be aware. And I like to say this all the time with my family is that if you can be aware, then you can be there.
Mm.
And instead of trying to come up with this really complicated magical thing to do, all you have to do is show up. Just show up. You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to be super. You don't even have to be funny. You just have to be there. It's kind of like when our kids were really young and they were afraid at night. Or let me go back to this. Maybe when our kids were young, or maybe we can go back to when we were young and a really, really bad storm came up. And you're in your room and the thunder and the lightning and it was cracking. And in that moment, all of us as kids would run to our parents' room. And
Yeah.
it's not that our parents could stop the storm, but our parents just being present and us feeling their presence gave us the
Yeah.
peace to know that it'll be okay. So for parents, I just want to encourage all of us to just be aware where our students are, where our middle schoolers are, so that you can be there. And just by the sheer fact of your presence, that's going to be enough so that you can pick up on things that have to be done.
Yeah.
So I will encourage all parents, this is one thing to really to look out for. It's just digital space.
Mm.
What we find is when kids are bored, they get into digital spaces, and it's not that they're intentionally looking for things that they shouldn't look for. It's just that the more time online, the more time you're potentially going to get into stuff you shouldn't get into. So
Yeah.
you've got a middle schooler that gets into places that they shouldn't go digitally, and then they're just curious, because God made our bodies and feelings and hearts and minds to respond to certain things that we see. As adults, we understand them. As middle schoolers, they do not. And then they get into it, but they don't know how to get out of it because if I go and tell my dad what I just saw, then I'm admitting to him I'm looking at something that I shouldn't, and then I might get in trouble. So this fear of getting in trouble keeps them from exposing it to their parents. So then they don't get help. So then they get trapped and in bondage and a lot of questions. So
Mm,
just be aware of the
yeah,
digital spaces that they get into, because that's where you could have a long lasting effect of the
yeah.
virus, because they're dealing with the stuff they got into when they're home alone.
Yeah, for sure. And parents, I want to encourage you, if you, there are a lot of tips and tricks and things you can do on phone settings to help with that. Like you can set, like I have Instagram time limits on mine because I will spend hours scrolling through Instagram and it will pop up, when I've got 5 minutes left and say, do you want to keep going? And it's that pause where I have to say, am I going to ignore this limit or am I just going to push forward? And I'll admit, sometimes I push forward and I waste more time on Instagram, but sometimes it hits me and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I need to stop because I got other things I need to be doing or not doing that I don't need to be on here. And so if you are looking for that and would like some tips and helps on that, please just let me know. I can get you articles and even walk those through with you personally. But Jason, what I want to do to end our time together here with our middle school parents is just this. My parents are divorced, and so I recognize that and how that impacts the life of a family. And so if you would, maybe let's just talk about the parent relationship between mom and dad, and then maybe like if they're in social isolation and there's a parent that's not able to see their kid, or a parent that it's joint custody and there's a parent that has the kids and the other one doesn't. How do they, can we just maybe spend just a few moments on that? Like I'm a firm believer that when the mom and dad are healthy, spiritually as individuals, then as a husband and wife, the family is better, right? And so what are some ways, because they're probably spending more time than they ever have, unless both people work from home, which there's some, might be some, but a lot of us, this is new to us, spending this much time at home. I know it's new for me. I've been married almost 4 years and I've never spent this much time on a weekly basis at home with my wife, and we have a 7-month-old, and it's like I'm learning all this new kind of stuff. And so I would love, Jason, for you as you wrap us up, just to maybe talk a little bit about those situations and maybe some guidance that you would give parents there.
Yeah. So I'll give you an illustration and then we'll talk practically. Um, I say this many times, be a thermostat and not a thermometer.
Mm,
And what I
that's
mean
good.
by that is a thermometer reacts to the temperature around them, right? There's no setting on a thermometer, just you have the thermometer and it reacts to how hot or how cold it is.
Mm,
So instead of being a thermometer, which is reacting to the temperature around, be a thermostat, which means it doesn't matter what the temperature is here. I'm going to set it at this temperature and we're going to work
mm,
to get it to that temperature. So be a thermostat, not a thermometer. And why that is hopeful is no matter what your family structure is, if you have a place that you're trying to get, then you can design a path to get there.
yeah.
It's difficult, especially if you're co-parenting or if you've got joint custody, or even if you're two parents working from home. Like,
Mm,
they're all different situations, but we all want to get to the right place, which is that we want to meet the needs of our children that have been put under our care. So
yeah.
recognizing that, we have to make some of those adjustments. We've got to be the thermostat instead of the thermometer. So, and honestly, there's no real easy. Um, what is important, what we try to do, we don't do it every night, but we try to do is we try to plan out the next day on the night before.
Mm,
Because what we do is there's things that we have to do. There's some online schooling that we have to do. There's some online meetings that I have to be a part of. But there's also some connection time that I need to have with, my spouse or with my children. So setting the expectations the night before gives clarity to everyone in my family what's going to happen, so
mm.
that when we're trying to live out that day, everyone's not going, what, I didn't know that. Perfect example, just don't tell my son this. he um,
Sorry, Jason, your screen froze.
we're
There you
back.
go. Go for it.
I
Yeah.
got it. So a good example is with my son. Please don't tell him I told you guys this, since we're just amongst friends here.
That's
Um,
right.
he didn't do his online coursework one day. And I said, hey, you didn't do your work. He's like, oh, I forgot. I'm like, not really. You just don't forget to do your work. And part of it really was we didn't have a plan. So
Mm,
as a couple or as an individual or someone that's co-parenting or joint custody, if you look at what needs to happen the next day, then you can plan the things that you need as a couple and you make it work. My dad, I hated this because he would say it to me all the time growing up. He would say, plan your work and work your plan.
mm,
And I swore I'd never say that because he said it so much. And now I say it all the time. So to keep yourselves as a couple being the best you that you can be, plan out what needs to happen the next day so then you can plan
mm.
stuff for you guys as a couple. If you're
That's
in
right.
a co-parenting situation where your marriage is, you're divorced, plan what needs to happen for the child, your middle schooler, and then communicate with your ex so that you can at least give it the best shot that's going to happen. Because honestly, some people have cordial relationships and some people don't. But if you can
Mm,
make it about the kid, then you can make space for what's needed for you. So
sure.
it's that whole idea of planning your work and working your plan. Because if you know the things that must be done, then you can schedule in the things that are critical for your marriage and for your children so that they play out in a realistic way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think too, we say, I said several times, when mom and dad are healthy, the family's better, right? But if you're in a situation where you're co-parenting or, you're divorced and you're raising your children on your own, like when you're personally healthy, the home's better. Like you might not have a spouse in the same home with you, but like when you are as an individual healthy, whether that's, going on the back porch and drinking a cup of coffee in the morning and just taking a moment of silence and relaxing or whatever that looks like for you to be healthy, when you're healthy, the home is healthy. And so I just wanted to
Hey, let me
speak
say
that to you.
this,
Go ahead.
just
Yeah.
being super transparent. What we're seeing by and large, and hopefully this difficulty allows you parents to know that you're not alone. We're actually seeing that the parents are having a lot harder time than the
Mm,
students, right?
yep.
That really up until yesterday when they announced that school was you would not be school, like most of the kids were like pretty chill. They're like, hey, this is great. I can
Yeah.
casually forget my online schoolwork. I mean, they'll figure it out, but it's good. And for most, there's some families in tragic situations, but it's the parents that are having to work
Mm,
from home or maybe lost their job or maybe figure out how to deal with their kids or they don't get any break from the kids. It's the parents that are having a difficult time. So if it's you as the parent that are like at
mm,
meltdown phase, I just want you to know that you're not alone, that there are a
that's right.
lot of, in spite of what social media says, right, in spite of all the pretend posts that everybody's putting up that
Mm,
everything is great, or even like your friends that are putting up vulnerability posts that make their vulnerability actually look great. um, Everyone is struggling and we're
that's right.
all in this together, so you're not alone. and
That's
and
right.
you've got to take care of yourself, because when you take care of yourself, then you're able to better take care of your kids.
That's right. Yeah, that's good. Well, middle school parents, I'm so thankful that wherever this video finds you, whether it's a couple days after we've shot it, maybe this is your relaxing time and you're trying to get healthy. Wherever this is coming to you at whatever platform, whatever laptop or iPhone or TV or whatever this is coming to you, I just want to say thank you so much for just taking the time to listen. We humbly just provide some of this stuff for you because we understand the struggle. We understand that there's a need, and we just want to, like we just talked about, we want to come alongside you. We don't want to come and say we've got it all figured out, you're doing it all wrong, this is what you need to do. No, we're just saying, hey, this is what we've seen, this is what we're thinking, and this is what we're trying, and we just want to come alongside you. And we'll be honest too, when things that we suggest might not work or they don't come out as well, like we'll be able to say that probably wasn't the best thing. But what we can say is that we are right beside you and that we are wanting to come alongside you. And lastly, what I want to do is I just want to let you know, as Jason said, you're not alone in this struggle amongst parents. Like you have other parents that are in this, whether it seems that way or not. But also Jesus sees exactly where you are. I was reading in John 10, this morning about John 11, where Jesus raises Lazarus. And that's the famous verse, the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept and all this stuff. And I was reading something and it said these things. It says, Jesus sees our tears. Jesus remembers our tears. And God does everything that he can to dry up our tears. And just know that, like, God sees you exactly where you are, sees exactly what's going on, sees exactly the struggle, and he is right there beside you and wanting to walk with you. So, Jason, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you hopping on, making the time. Middle school parents, thanks for tuning in. And know that we're praying for you, we're beside you, and we long to the day where we get to gather together again to worship Jesus and just to hang out. So middle school parents, if you need anything, please do not hesitate to reach out. Have a great day.